And we're live. It is Taura Tuesday time.
Hi, welcome everybody. Especially to us, because we can see that we're here. We can't see if you guys are there.
So Alan is late or not showing up. We'll find out. There he is. I just talked about him, so he decided to shame me. Yeah, I was just saying how you are always late to the party.
According to my watch right now, it's 7. So I'm like spot on, right on time.
No, that's not spot on. 7 has like 60 seconds. So
actually what we were saying, Alan, is we need an intro song, right? And the way they would have done it back home, the news intro has like a drum beat. And I'm like, wow, that could be Alan. Maybe he has to show up on time. So that won't work.
We would get him to pre-record it.
Smart. It's like you've done this before.
Yes. Alan is my brother, and we've done this for a while, so I know how to keep myself sane.
Self-preservation techniques, very smart.
I will pre-record. I will pre-record whatever sound we're going to use and make it be the announcement of, hey, you're about to have Taura Tuesday, people coming and talking.
Yeah, that's awesome.
Okay.
So, yeah. I think, we always never run out of things to talk about, but I guess we can start with the latest news, fresh off the press.
Oh,
What's fresh off the press?
Guilty. Guilty times 3.
yeah. Well, I'll take my bit because mine will be short. How about that? Because I know Alan has a lot of things to say.
We know how this goes.
Yeah. What I wanted to say is, like, people don't realize, like, that wasn't a sure thing.
No.
You know, like, he was murdered on camera, but it still wasn't a sure thing that the guy would be guilty. So, yeah. Okay. Let's hear it. Alan, tell us. Share the wisdom. Yes. Give the truth bombs.
The honest truth is, for me, the whole trial was already a big loss. Yes, we've gone through the trial and we've watched the system and we've watched what the system has done and how the system got away with things when everything wasn't on the camera. Right? You get a sense of how that happened and how probably it's still happening because there are still many cases that are going on that are not on camera, that don't have the same kind of attention that this trial had. So this one, we can say, yes, it's good. We're happy the guilty verdict is there. We're happy that there's some accounting of what somebody did. For me, it's good, but it's a drop. It's a tiny drop in the scheme of things, really. Because while the trial was going on, how many have already been killed? Right? While the trial is going on, like a young kid, hands up, 10 years old, dead. So, yeah, guilty verdict. Oh, yeah. But what does that mean in the grand scheme of things?
Yeah.
They're still dying because something should have happened with the reaction that came with the George Floyd thing, with the reaction, everybody on the street and everything. You would think there would be some kind of change even in the rate at which when we are seeing these occurrences. But no.
But do you think, like, maybe actually the reason that he got charged with murder, because he's just kind of, it was so front and center, and he's the fall guy. So it's like, oh no, but look, there's justice. And then everything carries on the way it does, sort of on the rest of the side streets. But they're like, no, look, the system works.
Yeah. It was so blatant. It was so in your face, so obvious that even the whole idea of even trying to not bring a guilty verdict, the atmosphere was just so charged that You didn't even need to be in Minnesota to know. They're like, bring anything that says not guilty. Then let's get the National Guard pulling out the guns, because something would have happened.
You know what? I really think there's a lot of healing that needs to happen, because the guilty verdict came out, and my first thought is, was he sentenced? What is the sentence going to look like, right? Like, is it going to be watered down because he's a white guy? Like, and then you kind of catch yourself and go, okay, am I really just always looking for the bad in things, or is it just really the experience that teaches you that you're always waiting for the other shoe to drop? So I say that to say, I think there's a lot of healing that us Black people, or the whole human race, humanity, needs to go through before moments like these are absolutely just a victory.
There needs to be reckoning, though, right? Like, you can't go from like trauma to healing without the reckoning.
So
that's right on point, Jackie, because it's a problem, because healing is almost like peppering things over. Yeah, you're gonna have a scab. We've healed. Looks like it, but you see, it really hasn't healed under there yet. So if you do something, it will open up that scab. And that's what has been happening for over 400 years. We're doing the same thing. Jump from this pain to healing. Jump from this pain to healing. No, let's just get from the pain to being pretty pissed and keep being pretty angry until we actually do tangible things that we see, not just talk, not just make it look like we're doing something. Let's talk. Oh, we have increased funding towards Black things. Oh, we have done programs towards Black people. And then when you go further in and you really look, that's actually not the case. It was just press being told that. If we can actually get to a point where we're doing tangible things and not just talk, then maybe.
Or, true story, or the funding is there, but not for Waterloo region, because apparently there's no Black folks here. That's what I heard. We should ask the provincial government a little bit more about that. But funding for Waterloo region.
I think that's lined up for one Tuesday, because we really need to explore the fact that there's no Black people in Waterloo region, so we don't need to get money. That's a whole other can of worms. But talking about trauma,
I discovered recently that I wasn't Black, so I don't live in Waterloo region or something. I'm still trying to come to terms with that.
There's that story that Trevor Noah tells, and we love Trevor Noah because he's like from our part of the world, and he's doing great in North America, but he gets a lot of our context from back home. And there's a piece that he does about how because he was a mixed race person, he was never seen as Black in Africa, and so he really wanted to come to the US because, as he says, it everybody's Black over there. So it's like, maybe if you want to be Black, you actually have to leave Waterloo region because there's no Black people here. So if you ever want to be not Black, this is the place to come.
Okay. Before you guys go ranting off my schedule, I want to keep you on my schedule here. So anyway, so talking about trauma, this is a good news, bad news. I don't know. I wanted to hear your reactions as Zimbabweans and hear, because this weekend was Independence Day, 18th of April.
Yeah. So
I just wanted to hear what that means to you. Alan, especially with your background. Not that Jackie doesn't matter. Jackie matters too, but
I'll defer to you guys for now while I listen what you because I might come out super radical and then
Okay, well, I'll go first because why not? So I obviously feel, well, for those who don't know, like, Independence Day in Zimbabwe is the day that Zimbabwe celebrates independence from like our version of the apartheid regime, which was in 1980. I always remember Zimbabwe being independent. I don't remember the before years. I was very young. In the, like, a number of years ago, I felt a lot of pain at Independence Day because I saw like how much, you know, people I cared about suffered, just because of things that were going on in the country. Now, I don't feel a huge amount. Like when learning what I've learned over the years, because I'm old and wise now, in case I didn't mention that already. Like there's a lot of hard stuff that has happened in Zimbabwe, and I see like a lot of traumatized people with, PTSD, like repeating that trauma on others. And so when you look at the need for healing, I would say there's a tremendous, tremendous need for healing in Zimbabwe. When you look at the healing over of scabs, I would say there's a lot of that there. Like people have said to me, oh my gosh, you're so lucky that you're here, because like basically Africans can't govern themselves. People say weird things to me because, and they say weird things to you guys too. Anyway, but it's just that trauma, like getting revisited on the next generation and the next generation and the next generation. A lot of that was colonization, but like it's just not having those avenues to find healing. Yeah. And I think, I think healing, it needs to happen on a personal level, on an individual level, but it also needs to happen on a community level. That is so important. I mean, it's the same when you look at like racial justice and understanding, racism and all of that. Yes, you have to do your own work as an individual, but it's incredibly important to do that work as a community as well, which is, I think, one of the strengths of, our work at Bring on the Sunshine, is that we really are engaging on a community level. So, okay, I'm going off tangent now. That's me.
Alan, did you want to say
I want to hear what you got to say.
Well, when I think about independence, I think it was a few years ago on one of these Facebook groups where someone who had left Zimbabwe when it was Rhodesia said something like, "Oh, I miss the good old days. I want to go back to the good old days." And I'm like, good for whom, really, right? Like, sure, the economy was good, but does that mean that we were happy, right? So I think of it now, like, I think that's kind of how I've reconciled celebrating Independence Day. Obviously, we still have a long way to go, but, our ancestors did fight the British. So we will acknowledge that. And, we have our country back, so to speak, with some folks who are, like Jackie said, who have their trauma and are working through their trauma. But at the end of the day, do I want to go back to before independence? No, I don't. Right? Like, it's kind of those necessary steps, like when we talked about, like here in Canada, where it's the land reconciliation, all these issues that come up in any world that was colonized, where the native people were, mistreated. There's going to be issues 30 years and 40 years, issues that are very hard to solve on let's just enact a law and then things are better, right? Like, you can't solve things on that level. So, I think in the case of Zimbabwe, and for most African countries, I do believe that after independence, they've gone through some kind of struggle. It's just Zimbabwe had a long way to fall because we were we were quite that advanced, right?
And the thing is, like the countries pointing fingers at the failures of Africa they are older, and they also have a longer history of like the decimation of indigenous people. Like, like Alan and I go into the schools, and something we always emphasize is that like Zimbabwe and African countries are being governed by the indigenous people. Like in Canada, settlers, people who look like me, came and wiped everybody out. There was like genocide, and then settled here and said, "We're amazing, we're Canada, we're peaceful." Like, like just.
Yeah. So in short, I acknowledge Independence Day, though, obviously there's a lot of pain still and healing. But I think in the past little while, in what I've seen anyway, I know in Zimbabwe, this weekend they were showing the documentary on Mbuya Nehanda, who is one of the spiritual mediums that was what's the word I'm looking for? Persecuted?
Murdered.
Murdered. Yes. Who was murdered during the liberation struggle. And so, and those are stories that we probably didn't grow up knowing as much, but now people are starting to talk about that and accept the painful parts of our history and celebrating those things. So there is some good, but mixed emotions, I guess. Hey, your turn, Alan.
Yeah. Independence.
I feel like it's a poem. It's a poem that's.
We should maybe write one.
Oh yeah, I will. But first of all, my question is independence from what?
Well, because, in 1980. Well, yeah, that's true. Yeah.
I mean, because what the revolution started off wanting and what the revolution called for, and the revolutionaries who gave up their lives in that fight called for, did not happen in 1980.
No.
So, when I was a kid, growing up, obviously you are under the euphoria of independence. I remember starting off school and jumping into these buses, and grown-ups would throw you through the windows.
Going to the nearest acre.
Right? Yeah. And you go to school for free, and it was like, oh, euphoric, independence. But within 2 years, guns were already popping again. Right? 3 years. By 1983, I couldn't go to the rural areas anymore because apparently there was an insurgency. Right? So people were shot. Now, it was our apparent freedom fighters. We're now doing the shooting. Okay? And so from 83 to about 87, going home, I'm from the Midlands. We are all pretty much from the southern parts of Zimbabwe, so we know what happened. This genocide that went there, basically the killing, tribal war, right? And after 87, there's this let's bring peace, let's do things together, but certain parts of the country are still left behind, per se. And then it translates, obviously, to the rest of the country because the people leading or ruling were that bad that initially with DMC, we thought it was only the outskirts, the outlying parts of Zimbabwe that were suffering. And then with the time, up to now, we realized the suffering was coming in more and more. The circle was closing because they were feeding only themselves. So now the thought is, independence from what? Because initially we fought because we were not being fully fed, right? And now, still in the same position, not being fully fed. We can say we have land, we took land back, but no, we didn't. Because the few still own the land. And you have no access to land if you want it. So,
but Alan, I want to challenge you for a bit on that, because I understand why you're saying independence from what. But my thing is, the Zimbabwe was colonized for so many years, and the system and the economy that was built, supported by the British because they were supporting their British folks who are living in Zimbabwe, right? And so when we get independence, supposedly, we get independence from the British. The expectation that things would be okay overnight would be unrealistic, right? Because now what has happened during that colonial period is that you have stripped people of their identity, you have robbed people of their culture, and you've created this economy that is not indigenous to us. And, so all these things have been stripped away. Not only that, but during that period, in order to maintain that control, you know, the British would perpetuate this tribal wars, right? Because if you have all the people of Zimbabwe in unison, then you couldn't rule them. So, but if you split them up, then you stand a better chance. So then what, wouldn't you, having seen all that backdrop, wouldn't you see then how the progression of events after independence would be? Because now you've left people in their trauma and said, now go create a country in a foreign system. Yes, it's our land, but we're now forced to adapt in a system that is not ours, in your system, but on our land. And you've already divided us and told us some of us are better than others. So for me, even with the ruling parties, it's all an inheritance from colonialism.
I would say this. You are a revolutionary. You are fighting to change a system. You are thinking of something different to the system you're fighting. That's why you want to change it.
Yeah.
Right? So you should be thinking of doing that. So to go to a war and wage a war for pretty much 17 years, 1963, well, 66 we can say, so that's 14 years. You wage a war, intense war for 14 years, and then you don't know what you do after those 14 years. You don't know the system you're fighting was only built for the few. The small percentage, which it worked perfectly for, and everybody else worked for that small percentage. Now, if you are saying you're a revolutionary, then you have found a system that works for everyone else. You jump in, you walk in, and you've got goodwill from across the world. We're going to assist and help you because we believe in what you want to do. Yes, it may not 100% be, but you can't sit back and use the same very system and laws that you were fighting to say, I'll fix it later. And then
but that's all you know, though. That's all you know. How do you know any different? Okay, like if you've been fighting for 16 years, right? Give me an age. What time did you go to war? What time are you recruited? How old are you when you're recruited?
Teens and in your 20s.
Right. And then you spend the next 16 years fighting a war. But so you're expecting when you come on the other side.
How old was Mugabe in 1980? How old was Nkomo in 1980? How old was Edison? Okay, he was dead. All the other guys, Zinga and Tumbuka and all the other guys, they were all in their 30s and 40s.
Right.
And they all had spent time. But they all spent time living abroad. There's quite a lot. Not everyone was quite a lot were sent to all these different countries around the world to sit and learn and be technocrats. That's why we have a guy who's now foreign minister, Derek Chauvin. He was one of those who were sent. Not Dismas, what is it? Chidero. Those were all working at the UN and they all had the skills. So people who had the skills were there. Because they actually set up the revolution to be, these are the fighters, these are the army guys, but we know we're going to need technocrats when we get. So people did.
Yeah, but who's teaching them?
Who's teaching them?
Yes. What is? I recently saw something that said nobody's going to teach you how to overthrow them.
Absolutely. That's true.
So these guys that you're saying they were there and they're educated. They're educated by whom? To what purpose? What are they taught to value? They're not taught based on
No. It's like today. I went through the same education systems, but I'm completely aware that there's something wrong with the systems that taught me. Right? I'm completely aware. I've learned, I understand completely who is teaching me and where they're coming from in their teaching, but I pick what works for me and I work with that and I push that. And they had that opportunity and they had a whole country and a whole army behind them to actually effect change. And they didn't. So I'm like, independence from white people. But then these guys came and did exactly the same things that white people were doing. No, nothing changed, actually. for everybody else. So independence from what? That's where my problem
I think
is.
you turn out the way you are because it is to some extent, if we look at that those earlier years of Zimbabwe or whatever, the education that we received, or even just the ideology of growing up in Zimbabwe and thinking that I can be anything is something those guys did not grow up with. So obviously, as an adult, it's going to change. That you have the option to question authority. They didn't grow up knowing that.
But Alice, they questioned authority to the maximum level. These guys were blowing up trains and stuff. So that's, if you're not questioning authority, I think if you can put some TNT together and put fire to it and kaboom, that's questioning authority to the maximum.
No,
Guys,
there's still a level of Alan of like I think there's still a level of mindset that we would have an advantage from that they didn't benefit from because of the cultural context. It's the same as if you were in Canada. If you're during the slave days, those people would demand less than we do now because we were raised differently, right? We were raised with a little bit more privilege than they were. So they would demand stuff, but maybe to the mind is not as free as we are. Not that we're free, but
think about this. These guys, they spoke of Karl Marx, Lenin, Trotsky, right? They were very well read.
Yes, they were.
That's why they could articulate their revolutionary position so well. That's why they could convince everyone, like, what we're going for is absolutely on point. This cannot work. So they were completely aware. It's not like they were executing
they're not aware.
Huh?
I'm not saying they're not aware.
Right.
I'm just saying, like, I imagine I've never killed anyone, but I imagine after the first one, it's a little bit easier than the first one, right? So with them, it's like that damaged mindset where
I won't say anything.
You plead the fifth. I know you will.
but I would only say, 1980 for me, and the change over that's a change of who walked into the office, and the change of who you see at the police station when you go there, and that's pretty much it. And then,
but I think we can agree that our ancestors or the people who came before us did fight for our liberation. And so we can acknowledge that on Independence Day, right? It is a day to think of that.
I would say all those who lost their lives.
Yes.
Before 1980.
Yes.
Before 1980.
No. Some lost their lives after 1980.
Okay. Let me finish my point. I would say all those who lost their lives before 1980, because guns were popping and stuff. Heroes. I respect you. I got love for you. I lost lots of family, and everybody lost lots of family.
Mm-hmm.
So so much respect, because they were fighting for something they believed in. And then there's obviously those who died after 1980 because they started resisting what they were seeing. Mm-hmm. This didn't start like 10 years later. It started right at 1980.
Yeah.
Right? Demobilization funds disappeared and all that stuff and everything. So this thing was already in play, and some were already against it.
Yeah.
And they lost their lives. But then most of these guys who stayed with Robert and are now with the Emerson and the rest of them, these guys need to go see doctors, because there's some PTSD going on that they never went and took care of. And we're still suffering that PTSD that they're dealing with. They're in there deciding, Royan, that's not a solution. Shoot people, that's not a solution. But that's the solution you knew when you were fighting in the war. But we're not fighting that war anymore. This is a war of ideas, and let's plan this and that. So please, go see some therapists and help us out. For real. You need some mental health. It's not a bad thing to get some mental help.
Clearly, Alan's not planning on going back to Zimbabwe. I am. But anyway.
Oh, I definitely am. And I would repeat it even when I'm standing there. Be like, if you're going to fight and say, hey, it's not correct to ask for people to get some help, then why are we advocating for mental health? Because it is. I don't know anyone who has fought a war where they have things shot at them, blue all around them, that doesn't need some kind of therapy. And that's who we've got as presidents and ministers and stuff. So we wonder why their default position is violence. So independence.
Yeah. No, we still agree that we respect the ones that died before and some after independence.
Yeah, let's start right at the top. In Zimbabwe, there's so much trauma. Trauma from when we fought the war, trauma with what happened with Gukurahundi, and trauma with all the political stuff that has been going on. We all have trauma. We really need to be like, the UN should just be like, y'all need about 2 million mental health doctors. Here you go. Let's just take a month.
But it has to be the African version of therapy.
It does.
Yeah, restitution. I mean, and let's see. We used to have it. You know, we always did mental health thing stuff because Ngozi and stuff. When you go and pay restitution to the family, somebody kills someone and then the whole family gets restitution. You don't get put in jail because ain't no restitution in jail, but you pay the family back and the family forgives you and you actually have peace and they have peace as well. Yeah. We need that.
Yeah, I think I was reading somewhere that's the thing that's missing, that there was no cleansing after independence. All that blood that was shed on our soil was not cleansed, and so we have, part of why the spirits haven't been able to move on, because we didn't do what culturally was in us to do. But why didn't we do it? Because
literally
taken away from us.
Yeah, if you think about it, is it normal to find a leader or leaders who laugh because their people are getting beat? You know, you can see a video of somebody getting beat. Hey.
Yeah, so restitution, I think, is a whole other really big conversation in itself, for sure. But, I know, like, in my travels, I have met Zimbabweans who don't want to go back because of things that have happened, and they carry so much pain, right? And it's just, I know I've had this conversation with you, Alice, but we're talking about, like, oppression, and obviously, like, I'm a white person, like, my face, my history represents a culture that has oppressed a lot of other people across the world. And even though I didn't directly do any of it, it's like there's that memory is in your cells, so like the people who have been oppressed, yes, there's healing to be done. But I think, like, we, as the descendants of the oppressors, we don't recognize, like, the damage that was done to us.
Yeah.
Well, that is in our cell memory, like 7 generations or whatever you want to call it. Like, there's healing to be done. Like,
And this damage, that's the thing is, I hear people a lot of times go, for every action, there's an equal and opposite reaction. And I'm like, why don't you think it applies to actually your life? That if it affected Black people this way, it also affected white people. Like,
which is interesting, because we are okay saying there's an equal and opposite reaction, but when they came to Africa, when they came to Zimbabwe, and we had Ngozi and all this stuff, and we're talking about the things that were passed down from your ancestors, then we're talking witchcraft. How is that different? So you strip us of those things that help us deal with these spiritual problems or these ancestral problems, whatever your inheritance is from the environment, and leave us with no way to actually cope and deal with it. Like,
I know, like Alan and I, again, we've had such interesting conversations in the schools, but there is a class that we've gone to multiple times who they study a lot of Indigenous stories and knowledge and history and all of that. And one of the things that struck me so profoundly was when they were saying that Indigenous people in Canada were not allowed to perform any of their traditional ceremonies or any of the things that they knew how to do in order to bring healing to themselves.
Yeah.
And then if you have a very short view of history, you'll be like, wow, like Indigenous people are whatever, all the stereotypes, right? They just can't be productive members of society or whatever the thing is that you think that they should be. But when you look at it, the story, like over time, you're like, well, they can't heal, right? Yeah. You look at that also like in an African context, right? Like, like it's, like for me, like I really think that like we as humans from different tribes and cultures and whatever around the world, we're all striving and learning how to be good humans together in the world, and we find like different ways of doing that and different ways of expressing that through our faith. But there are going to be some ways of doing that are going to speak like to your cell memories, because that's like your Indigenous and tribal and cultural and historical heritage.
Yeah.
So I mean, it's like another touchy topic is Christianity. This is a way of being in the world. Some things, some bad things, whatever. It's another discussion.
Yeah.
But it's like, yeah.
Yeah, and I think even as an African, whether you're a Christian, not a Christian, or whatever faith you subscribe to, it can never look like the European version of spirituality, because I'm not white. Like, it just, your body just does not respond the same way. Like it just,
I came to church. I'm sure it was the same for you guys, right? You go to church back home. That's one kind of experience. You come to church and you're like, huh, wow, okay, that's different.
I never told you this, but they, usually we do these drumming things, and we play the Mbuya, and I'm fine. I'm like, whatever. But then there was one time we did a drumming circle. It was you. I can't remember if it was Garima was there or whatever. And we were sitting in a circle, and I think you started chanting, and I was like, oh my God, I gotta go, because my spirit actually reacted to it, right? And like, when it's not native to me, I'm sitting there unfazed. But when my spirit hears those familiar sounds, it doesn't matter what faith you ascribe to. There's just things that you're going to react to, whether you want to or whether you don't want to react to it. It's involuntary.
I like dropping myself in it, because I and I'll be like, religion is a set of rules giving you a guidance to get back to spirituality. Because you to find that connection, that space. So religion is that set of rules, or whatever you're doing, that gets you there. Well, we're already there.
Yes, we were. We really were.
So my question becomes, why did we discard our ways to go back to being told rules and ways?
It's
you're there.
It's like in the Bible when Adam and Eve are naked, and they say, oh, we're naked. Who told you were naked, right? It's like, how did this revelation come when you're already on the journey to live your life? But at least, whatever we feel about independence, where things are, I think, as Black people, we now have the liberty to have these conversations. There's no white people's fountain, which they would have been in Zimbabwe as well. There's no white people's schools, which they were in Zimbabwe. Like all these, so we may not be absolutely free. However, we now have the option to free our minds.
Okay. So, on one end, I have uncles and family who fought and died. So I respect what they believed. I just don't respect the leaders that were left after 1980 and what they've done to the dreams that galvanized a people to pick up arms. Because when people went and picked up guns, they knew they could die. Yeah. They knew before leaving Kumusha. They knew. Mm-hmm. I remember when my uncles left, and I was about 5, right? And they knew, and they're like, bye-bye. And you're looking at them like thinking, and some didn't come back, right? So when you think of that kind of ultimate sacrifice, and then you have these buggers who are sitting there now. See, there's one I don't remember who said, when we came from the war, all of us had nothing, but 7 years later, some were millionaires. How? You're in government. What happened? Right? So just when that flip happened, then all that revolutionary talk and all this and that and the other, and all about, hey, we're about our culture, we're about to. It started causing a lot of questions in me, just becoming an adult and seeing. I'm like, if we are so free and we're so, why are we still wearing those white gowns that people wear? I mean, those head things, like, why you have the head coverings to go to court? Why are we trying to look like judges in England? If we're so on our own, shouldn't we just be completely proud of us the way we are?
Colonization of the mind. Yeah, our minds have been.
That's why I'm like, these revolutionaries leave a lot to be desired.
No, but we have the option now to at least educate ourselves, reclaim our history, and put our history on the map, which Bots is doing its job in that front. I thought we would cover another topic today, but apparently not.
I feel like Alan could probably have his own TV show just on this topic. There's a lot there.
I don't think we want to do that for his sake, because we still want him to go to Zimbabwe. So
and come back.
and come back.
I'll just say it's really a very sore point, because Zimbabwe, as tiny as it is, right, and what we produce and what we give up to the world in terms of raw materials, even if it's not made into something else, just the raw materials alone, we've got over $60 billion. We've got over $60 billion equipment. I mean,
our people,
right?
amazing,
and our people,
amazing people in the world.
Yeah, amazing, right? But now when we produce, we have the potential to produce over 60 billion in GDP every year, just in materials that we produce, raw materials. And there is less than 10 million of us. Why are there poor people in Zimbabwe? It's like, seriously, like, give me a bloody break. Like, that's where my problem is. I'm like, independence cannot be independence if people are still going to bed suffering every day in such a tiny, rich country. Nobody should be. UAE, I don't know any Emiratis who suffer. They don't. Because their country can afford, because it's rich enough to, and that's Zimbabwe. We don't even need to even argue on that. It's so rich. That's why everybody wants to go to Zimbabwe to do mining, to do whatever. But the Zimbabweans themselves don't get nothing. Oh, independence.
So we went on that huge rant about Zimbabwe, and I think it was important for us to talk about it because we're native to Zimbabwe, and our experience a lot of the times aligns with the Native Americans of here.
Yeah.
And so when whoever you are watching, when you think about what the Native experience is, whether the natives took over the country, or in the case of Canada, where the natives still didn't take over the country, there's repercussions for the colonization, for slavery, all of it, that we're still feeling. I don't know if it'll go away, but
no,
we're traumatized.
Like the native situation here. Think about it. Canada, G, blah, blah, whatever G they're in. Whatever G we are in, I don't know. But that G something apparently means we are in the top level of economically developed countries. Why the heck is there still water advisory for natives? Why is the heck for the First Nations? Why do we still have it when we're a rich country? Come on now. Like, seriously? And then as time goes, people wonder why the First Nations youth are annoyed and mad at the system, well, along with the black kids. And just so you know, the fastest growing populations in Canada are those marginalized ones. And time is coming soon enough where the vote flips it over.
Yeah, I
And
think my like the takeaway or the truth bomb that I would like to leave is that, you know, like coming here, there was always a sense that, you know, we in the West are very different from the rest of the world. And for myself, I was just always so struck by the ways that we're more similar than we are different.
yeah.
And then I forgot my other thought, so I'll just stop right there.
Yeah, so when atrocities were committed on North America or Africa or whatever continent it was, you know, the impact is the same, and we hope we've shared some of our trauma with you today, besides just
Oh, not trauma. We don't want to share trauma, please. Let's like stop sharing the trauma.
no, educate,
Healing.
You know,
healing. It's, well, I don't know, whatever. We've shared something.
Yes, we did.
I would say for whatever reasons, right? It could be colonial, it could be just being nasty. For whatever reasons, the governments in Africa, governments in America, in Europe, they all have agendas. And to point and say, oh, that's Africa, so all the governments are bad in Africa. That's like, how do we have the native population here not having clean water in such a rich country with so much money? How good is the government then, whether it's provincial or federal? And it's not about the liberals, because we've had conservative governments before and the situation still didn't change. So it means it's a Canadian thing. It's people.
And it's not just water. Some of those
Everything.
So
this idea that, oh, in Africa over there they got it bad, they are terrible, they mismanaged it. Bloody hell, it happens here too, right here. It's right here. It's just oh, in Africa they got corruption. Here, remember some people got some money in the Panama something, and they're still leading us. So I hear somebody talking about African corruption. I'm like, shut the F up.
I know, right?
Yeah.
Like on that note, I think that is a good note to end. Thank you very much for watching. We usually try to keep it positive, not today, but enjoy the rest of your week, and we'll catch you next week on Taura.
Yes, on that energetic note.